In the heart of a merciless winter, the Dakota plains were swallowed by a blizzard that howled like a grieving spirit. Snow fell in relentless sheets, obscuring the horizon and burying the world in white. Amid this frozen chaos, a young woman named Clara stumbled through the drifts, her breath shallow, her body trembling. She was a schoolteacher from Boston, drawn to the frontier by tales of adventure, but unprepared for the brutal cold. Her wagon had broken down miles from the nearest settlement, and now, lost and alone, she felt the icy grip of death tightening around her. Her thin coat offered little protection, and her fingers, numb and stiff, could no longer feel the satchel she clutched, a keepsake from her late mother. Clara's vision blurred as she sank to her knees, whispering a prayer into the wind. She didn't hear the soft crunch of moccasins approaching or see the shadow of a figure moving through the storm. T-E-A ring inverted exclamation mark A tilde superscript O-A-Kwa, a Lakota warrior known as Swift Horse, had been tracking a deer when he spotted her tracks, faint and erratic in the snow. His people, the Lakota, revered the land and its signs, and he knew the storm would claim her if he didn't act. Clad in buffalo hide, his face weathered by years of survival, he moved with purpose, his dark eyes scanning the whiteout. Swift Horse reached Clara just as she collapsed, her lips blue, her body shivering violently. He knelt beside her, his hand steady as he checked her pulse, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "Hold on, Wasaka woman," he murmured, using the Lakota term for a white person, though his tone was gentle. He wrapped her in his own robe, its warmth a lifeline, and lifted her onto his horse. The wind screamed, but Swift Horse's heart was steady. He had seen too much loss to let another life slip away. As he guided his horse toward his people's encampment, Clara's faint heartbeat echoed in his mind, a fragile promise of survival. The storm raged on, but within it, a spark of connection flickered, unseen but undeniable, between two souls from worlds apart. 2. The journey to the Lakota encampment was a battle against the blizzard's fury. Swift Horse rode with Clara cradled against him, her weight light but her presence heavy with urgency. His horse, a sturdy bay named Waamaya, pressed through the snow, guided by instinct and its rider's quiet commands. Swift Horse's thoughts churned like the storm around him. He was no stranger to hardship, but his life as a warrior had been shaped by the struggle to protect his people from encroaching settlers and the shifting tides of their world. Yet, this woman, a stranger with pale skin and fragile breath, stirred something unfamiliar in him. Her courage, however faint, reminded him of the resilience his grandmother spoke of, the strength of Waamaya W-A tilde cubed Y ring inverted exclamation mark A, the sacred power of woman. The encampment appeared like a mirage through the snow, a cluster of tipis glowing faintly with firelight. Swift Horse carried Clara into his family's lodge, where his mother, White Owl, and his sister, Singing Bird, sprang into action. They stripped Clara's frozen clothes, wrapping her in warm furs and rubbing her limbs with gentle hands to coax blood back into her veins. White Owl chanted softly, a prayer to Wakantanka, the Great Spirit, for the stranger's life. Clara stirred, her eyes fluttering open to meet Swift Horse's gaze. "Where broken bar am I?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Safe," he replied, his English halting but clear, "learned from traders and missionaries." The fire crackled, casting shadows on the teepee walls, and Clara's eyes held his for a moment longer than necessary. Singing Bird offered her hot broth, and as Clara sipped it, warmth seeped back into her bones. The Lakota family worked in quiet harmony, their hospitality a reflection of their values, even for a stranger. Outside, the storm roared, but inside, a fragile trust began to form. Clara, still weak, felt the weight of her survival and the kindness of these people she'd been taught to fear. Swift Horse watched her, his heart torn between duty to his people and the pull of this unexpected encounter, a collision of worlds that felt like the hand of fate. 3 days passed, and the blizzard held the encampment in its grip, forcing Clara to remain among the Lakota. She regained strength slowly, her body mending under White Owl's care, who shared stories of the land and its spirits. Clara listened, fascinated, her fear giving way to curiosity. She'd been taught the Lakota were savages, yet here was a family whose warmth rivaled any she'd known in Boston. Swift Horse visited often, bringing wood or checking on her, his presence steady but guarded. Clara noticed his hands, calloused from work, and the way his eyes softened when he spoke of his people. One evening, as the fire burned low, she asked him about his name. T-E-A ring inverted exclamation mark A tilde superscript O-A-Kwa, he said, then translated, Swift horse. My father gave it to me after I outran a storm to warn our hunters. Clara smiled, sharing her own name and its meaning alight. Clarity. Their conversations grew, bridging the gap between their worlds. Swift horse taught her Lakota words, laughing gently when she stumbled over them, and she shared stories of Boston's bustling streets, which he found both strange and wondrous. Yet, tension lingered. Some in the encampment, wary of outsiders, whispered about the Wasika woman. Swift horse faced their doubts, defending Clara's presence, though he wrestled with his own. His people were losing land to settlers, and trust was a luxury. Still, Clara's gratitude and quiet strength chipped away at his reservations. One night, under a sky clearing of clouds, they walked to the edge of the camp. Clara pointed to the stars, naming constellations, while Swift horse shared Lakota stories of the sky's spirits. Their hands brushed, and though neither spoke of it, the touch lingered like a promise. Clara felt torn. Her life in Boston called, but this place, this man, felt like a home she'd never known. Swift horse, too, felt the stirrings of something deeper, a bond that defied the divide between their peoples, yet he knew the path ahead was fraught with challenges neither could fully grasp. For, as the blizzard weakened, Clara faced a choice: stay with the Lakota or return to the settlement. The storm had delayed her journey, but it had also woven her into the fabric of the encampment. She helped singing birds sow hides, her clumsy stitches improving under patient guidance, and joined the woman in gathering what scarce roots the frozen ground offered. These acts, small but meaningful, earned her respect from some, though others remained distant. Swift horse, meanwhile, grappled with his role as a warrior. His people faced threats as soldiers patrolling the plains, treaties broken, and buffalo herds dwindling. Yet, Clara's presence brought a strange calm, a reminder of hope amidst struggle. One morning, he took her to a frozen stream, teaching her to read the ice for safe crossing, a skill his father had passed down. Clara, eager to learn, fell through a thin patch, and Swift horse's quick hands pulled her out, their laughter echoing in the quiet. The moment shifted something in them both: her trust in him, his admiration for her courage. Back at the teepee, White Owl noticed the change, her wise eyes seeing what her son hesitated to name. She spoke to Clara of love as a sacred fire, one that must be tended with care. Clara blushed, her heart racing at the thought of Swift horse, but fear crept in. Could love survive the chasm between their worlds? That night, a council meeting brought news of soldiers nearby, searching for a missing woman. Clara. Swift horse's jaw tightened, returning her meant safety but also loss. Clara overheard, her heart torn. She didn't want to leave, but staying could endanger the Lakota. As she sat by the fire, Swift horse joined her, his silence heavy. You must go, he said finally, though his eyes betrayed his heart. Clara nodded, tears falling, knowing the choice was not just hers but theirs, bound by a love that had grown in the storm's shadow, fragile yet fierce. 5. The decision to return Clara to the settlement weighed heavily on the encampment. Swift horse volunteered to guide her, knowing the journey would test his resolve. They set out at dawn, the snow now a manageable blanket underfoot, the air sharp but clear. Clara rode behind him, her arms around his waist, the closeness both comfort and torment. They spoke little, the silence filled with unspoken questions. Along the way, Swift horse pointed out landmarks: a sacred hill, a river his people called Mokpa, the river of stone. Clara soaked in every word, memorizing the land that had become part of her. At night, they camped under a sky blazing with stars, sharing a fire and stories of their childhoods. Clara spoke of her mother's death, her drive to teach, and her dream of a life with purpose. Swift horse shared his fears for his people, the weight of being a warrior in a changing world. Their words wove a tapestry of understanding, each story a thread pulling them closer. Yet, the nearing settlement loomed like a shadow. Clara wondered if she could return to her old life, knowing the depth of what she'd found. Swift horse, too, felt the pull of duty to his people, to his heart. On the final night, as they camped near a frozen lake, Clara reached for his hand. "I don't want to lose this," she whispered. Swift Horse's eyes met hers, raw with emotion. "The heart does not forget," he said, his voice steady but soft. They sat in silence, the fire crackling, their hands entwined. The next morning, the settlement's smoke rose in the distance, a stark reminder of the world awaiting Clara. Swift Horse's resolve wavered, but he knew letting her go was an act of love, just as saving her had been. As they approached the settlement, Clara's heart ached, knowing this journey's end was also a beginning, one they would have to fight for against the odds of their divided worlds. 6. The settlement was a cluster of wooden buildings, smoke curling from chimneys, a stark contrast to the Lakota encampment's harmony with the land. Clara's return was met with relief and suspicion. Soldiers and settlers alike questioned where she'd been, their eyes narrowing at Swift Horse. He stood tall, his presence commanding respect, but Clara saw the tension in his shoulders. She explained her rescue, praising the Lakota's kindness, but her words were met with skepticism. "Savages don't save people," a soldier muttered, and Clara's anger flared. She defended Swift Horse, her voice steady despite her fear. The settlers insisted she stay, offering a room at the boarding house, but Clara's heart was elsewhere. Swift Horse prepared to leave, his duty to his people calling, but Clara stopped him outside the settlement. "Will I see you again?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked at her, his eyes holding a promise. "The wind carries what the heart speaks," he said, a Lakota saying that felt like a vow. He gave her a small beaded charm, a gift from Singing Bird, and rode away, his figure fading into the snow-dusted plains. Clara clutched the charm, her resolve hardening. She spent days in the settlement, teaching children and writing letters to Boston, but her thoughts were with Swift Horse. She began learning more Lakota words from a trader who knew the language, determined to bridge their worlds. Meanwhile, Swift Horse returned to his people, facing questions about the Wasako woman. He spoke of her courage, her heart, and Dwight Owl smiled, seeing her son's love. But tensions with settlers grew, and Swift Horse knew their bond could complicate his role. Still, he dreamed of Clara, her face a beacon in his heart. Clara, too, felt the pull, sneaking away one night to leave a letter at the sacred hill, hoping the wind would carry her words to him. Their love, born in a blizzard, now faced the storm of a divided world, yet its roots grew deeper, unyielding. 7 weeks turned to months, and Clara's life in the settlement felt hollow. She talked, smiled, and answered questions about her ordeal, but her heart was with the Lakota. With Swift Horse, she began visiting the sacred hill, leaving small tokens of ribbons, pressed flowers, hoping he'd find them. One day, she saw hoof prints and a single eagle feather, a sign he'd been there. Her heart soared. Swift Horse, meanwhile, faced mounting challenges. Soldiers encroached closer to Lakota lands, and his role as a warrior demanded focus. Yet, he returned to the hill, finding Clara's tokens, each one a whisper of her presence. He left gifts in return, beads, a carved stone, symbols of a bond that refused to fade. One evening, he rode to the settlement under cover of dusk, watching Clara from a distance as she taught children outside. Her laughter, her kindness, struck him anew. Clara sensed his presence, her eyes scanning the horizon, and when she saw him, she ran to him, heedless of onlookers. They stood in the twilight, words tumbling out of her longing, his fears, their shared hope. "I want to be with you," Clara said, her voice fierce. Swift Horse hesitated, torn by duty, but her certainty anchored him. They devised a plan. Clara would return to the Lakota encampment, seeking permission to stay, to learn their ways. Swift Horse would speak to his elders, pleading their case. The risk was great of rejection, conflict, or worse, but their love demanded courage. Clara gathered her belongings, leaving a letter for the settlement, explaining her choice. Swift Horse rode ahead, preparing his people. White Owl and Singing Bird welcomed the idea, but others were wary, fearing Clara's presence could draw soldiers. Swift Horse stood before the council, his voice steady, speaking of love as a bridge, not a divide. Clara arrived, her heart pounding, and faced the council, her halting Lakota words earnest. The elders deliberated, moved by their bond, and granted her a chance to prove her place. Clara and Swift Horse embraced, their love a fragile victory in a world of uncertainty, but one they'd fight for together. 8. Clara's life among the Lakota began as a journey of learning and love. She worked alongside Singing Bird, mastering tasks like tanning hides and cooking over open fires, her hands growing calloused but her spirit light. Swift Horse taught her to ride, their laughter filling the plains as they raced under wide skies. The encampment slowly warmed to her, her efforts earning respect, though challenges remained. Soldiers patrolled closer, and Clara's presence drew scrutiny, but she and Swift Horse faced it together. They shared quiet moments, storytelling by the fire, stargazing, planning a future where their worlds could coexist. Clara wrote of her experiences, hoping to share the Lakota's humanity with the world, countering the settlers' fears. Swift Horse, inspired by her, spoke of peace to his people, a vision of harmony despite the tensions. One spring day, under a blooming cottonwood, they pledged their lives to each other in a Lakota ceremony, White Owl blessing their union with sage and song. The community gathered, their doubts softened by the couple's devotion. Clara wore the beaded charm Swift Horse had given her, now a symbol of their journey from a blizzard's edge to a shared life. Their love, born in desperation, had grown into a force of hope, bridging cultures and defying odds. As they stood together, hands clasped, the wind carried their vows across the plains, a testament to a love that had survived the storm and promised to endure. The future was uncertain as settlers, soldiers, and change loomed, but Clara and Swift Horse knew their bond was a fire that would burn bright, guiding them through whatever lay ahead, a true love forged in the heart of a blizzard and tempered by the strength of two hearts united.